Sadly, when you mention the name Chuck Pagano, most people automatically remember him as the head coach who got cancer when he was with the Colts, but Chuck was at one point considered one of the top up-and-coming coaches in the NFL. People have been skeptical of his time with the Colts, and he gets a lot of blame for the Bears' issues, but how good of a coach was he, and did he deserve all the blame for his issues? As most of you guys probably know by now, Pagano retired this past weekend, so I thought this would be a good time to put a spotlight on his rise and fall as a coach, and spotlight the movement known as Chuck Strong. Today I'm joined by my good friend Jackson Malone for this video, and he'll tell you guys about his time with the Bears, so please be sure to subscribe to his channel and check out his videos, as he'll start to grow a lot in the future, and also be sure to subscribe to me if you're new as well. Let me know what coach I should do next, and now let's get started and talk about what happened to Chuck Pagano. As we always do in this series, we need to go back in time and figure out how Chuck Pagano became a big-time coach to begin with. He was born and raised in Boulder, Colorado, and like most coaches, he played football as a kid and became a star player in high school. He went on to play college football for Wyoming, and since the league was out of reach for him, he went straight into coaching. He got his first gig in the college ranks as he was a graduate assistant for USC, and from there he also spent time at UNLV, Boise State, and East Carolina before he decided to move into the NFL ranks. He got hired by the Browns to be a secondaries coach, and then he was there from 2001 to 2004. After a year at the Raiders, he got his first big break as he was hired to be the defensive coordinator for the North Carolina Tar Heels in the ACC. He didn't spend much time in college though, as he went on to go to the Baltimore Ravens, where he eventually became the defensive coordinator. Under Pagano, the Ravens allowed the third fewest points and yards in the league that year and had 4 Pro Bowlers on the defensive side of the ball. The Ravens got all the way to the AFC Championship game, and Pagano was seen as a hot and up-and-coming coach in the NFL. Moving across the country to Indianapolis, the Colts had parted ways with head coach Jim Caldwell, and they would need a new guy. They ended up deciding to take a gamble and hired the defensive guy of Chuck Pagano to be their new head man. Peyton Manning had left the team after his neck issues and disgruntled with the organization. Ryan Grigson came in and was the new general manager, and the Colts were going to get off to a good start with Andrew Luck as their quarterback. Luck became a star in his first year with the Colts, and they finished with an 11-5 record, which was 9 games better than the previous year, and they were a 5 seed in the playoffs. This was good, but just a few games into the season, something was broke on the media that had the whole league and football world on complete edge. He had been feeling super fatigued, tired, and run down during the Colts training camp, but he chalked it up to the stresses of the job and the heat. Then he started to get bruises, and he knew something was wrong. Apparently his wife had even asked him if he was tackling players. After diagnosis, he was told he had leukemia, and the long-term outlook was grim. Originally, the Colts bye week was supposed to be week 9, but ended up being week 4 instead, and had he gotten checked out later, Chuck Pagano may not be around today. From weeks 5 to 16, he was in treatment at the hospital, and the movement known as Chuck Strong began, and a lot of awareness was raised. He spent nearly a month in the hospital, and this rallied the entire football world to support him, and the team did everything they could to support Chuck. Despite being new, Pagano was surprised and incredibly moved by the love and respect that he got from the players who hadn't even really known him for that long. He said, quote, "They didn't know me, or my wife, or my family. We'd only been there a short time, but the way that they supported us and myself, wow." Bruce Arians became the interim head coach, and they even left the light on in his office until he came back. He did a great job on the field, and Chuck beat cancer and returned the final week, and it gave everybody hope. As I said, the Colts would make the playoffs, but they did lose to the Ravens, where he had just come from. The following season, Pagano again led the team to an 11-5 record, won the AFC South, and were back to the playoffs. In the wildcard matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs, they overcame a 28-point halftime deficit to stun the Chiefs 45-44, and this was his first playoff victory and one of the most entertaining playoff games in NFL history. They did lose the following week to the Patriots though, and in 2014, the Colts once again went 11-5, and this was their best chance to make the Super Bowl. They beat both the Bengals and the Broncos before they got killed in the AFC Championship by the New England Patriots once again. This is when people started to question Pagano's coaching, but Deflategate was used as sort of a distraction, and you guys all know what that is. In 2015, Andrew Luck struggled with injury, the organization and Pagano didn't see eye to eye, and they missed the playoffs with an 8-8 record. He did keep them in playoff contention all year though, and he had a league-high 6 wins with backup quarterbacks, so they decided to extend Chuck's contract for 4 more years and showed faith in him moving forwards. In 2016, the Colts went 8-8 once again and missed the playoffs. In 2017, Andrew Luck missed the entire season, and the team went 4-12, and they beat the Houston Texans in the final week. After missing the playoffs for the 3rd straight season, Chuck Pagano was fired by the Colts management, and his time with the organization was now over. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jackson, and he's going to talk about his time with the Bears.
Thank you so much for having me on the channel. For those of you guys listening, Scott is an amazing dude, and he really knows his football. So if you're not subscribed already, I highly recommend it. So looking at Chuck Pagano's time with the Bears, he was brought in on January 11th, 2019, and he was hired as their defensive coordinator, replacing Vic Fangio, who left to become the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He only coached there for 2 seasons in Chicago, but he had great results. In his first season, he had the second best defense in the entire NFC in 2019, only behind the 49ers, and this was 8th overall in the entire NFL. In 2019, though, he did have some help. He had Khalil Mack, his second year as a Bear, as a Pro Bowler, and Eddie Jackson and Kyle Fuller as the secondary also made the Pro Bowl. This year, they made the playoffs with a 12-4 record, which was their best record since they lost in the Super Bowl in 2006. But Bears fans are already cringing about the 2019 wildcard game with the double doink off the upright, only from 43 yards away. I'm sorry, Bears fans. In Pagano's second season, their numbers dropped a little bit. They were 7th in the NFC in 2020, but 11th overall in the entire NFL. This was partially due to the Bears not being as elite anymore, but partially due to other teams in the NFC making large improvements as well. But their only Pro Bowler in 2020 was Khalil Mack. Avid Bears fans complained about Pagano this season due to the fact that his defensive schemes seemed to be solid, but also stagnant and predictable. They realized that in the majority of plays, they dropped 7 in coverage and only rushed their front 4. They started to miss the creative blitzes that Vic Fangio often drew up. In 2020, they were a bend but don't break defense, because where they played their best was in the red zone, and we know this is where games are won and lost. In the NFL, most games are decided by 1 possession, so the difference between field goals and touchdowns can be huge, and it adds up over the course of the game, but this is where their defense excelled in 2020. Their offense was struggling very bad, though. They did go 8-8 and made the playoffs, but lost in the wildcard game again, and this time pretty handily to the Saints. But these 8 wins are a little bit deceiving in themselves, because they beat 8 different teams, and if you add up all the wins from the teams and divide it by 8, each team they beat only had about 5 wins on the season on average. They beat 1 playoff team, albeit a very impressive one, over the Buccaneers. On the defensive side, there was an outrageous amount of dropped interceptions and the lack of forced fumbles that the Bears fans have gotten so accustomed to seeing. But as a coach, you can only do so much. If you get the guys in the right positions, they still have to go out there and make the plays. It can just be so easy to throw the coach under the bus, and that's exactly what happened. Chuck Pagano has become a scapegoat for many Bears fans because they like to think that the defense or his schemes are the main problem. Numbers never lie, and the numbers say that they had the 29th ranked offense in 2019 and the 26th ranked offense in 2020. So a combined regular season record over those 2 years being 20-12 is kind of a miracle. And the Bears should be more focused on their disaster quarterback battle between regular season Nick Foles and less than desirable Mitch Trubisky, who can look like 2018 Pro Bowl Mitch Trubisky, but then can follow up that performance and look like a JV backup. And whether Chuck Pagano would have been fired or not will always be a mystery. His production does not warrant him losing his job, but NFL executives have been known to follow false narratives led by fans. So what made Chuck Pagano retire may also be a mystery. He grew ill and had leukemia with his time with the Colts, so it may be wanting to retire already, or maybe rumors of him getting fired got to him and he wanted to get ahead of it. My guess is it's a good balance of both. And where things are now, that the Bears will be looking for their 3rd defensive coordinator in just 4 years after Chuck Pagano announced his retirement January 13th, 2021.
Thank you, Jackson. So why did Chuck ultimately flame out? Well, first I want to address the elephant in the room, and that is the very fact that it is really hard to fire a coach who has beaten cancer while on the job and is a very inspiring and wholesome person. They likely gave him a longer leash due to his illness, and here's what Irsay had to say when he was fired. Quote, Chuck Pagano provided Colts fans with many exciting wins and memories as head coach of the Colts. Throughout his tenure in Indianapolis, he impacted the lives of the players he coached, those who worked within the organization, and Colts fans across the globe. Chuck's first season was one of the more inspirational stories in NFL history, as he courageously battled and overcame leukemia. As a result, his Chuck Strong Foundation has raised millions for cancer research. We are thankful for Chuck's contributions to our franchise and the community, and we wish him, Tina, and the entire Pagano family nothing but the best moving forward. Clearly, everyone respected Pagano, and Irsay thought very highly of him. He didn't want the last thing he ever said about Pagano to be about football, but instead about what he did for the organization, the good things he did, and how he inspired, and I really respect Irsay for that. Pagano just wasn't a top-tier coach, and his best role would have been as a coordinator, and he did a great job at the Bears in my opinion. He peaked in 2014, and from there, nothing was the same when he was at the Colts, and you have to mention the fact that Luck was injured, and that Ryan Grigson couldn't bring in any decent players out of the draft, and he could not put an offensive line around Andrew Luck, but ultimately, the team just was not headed in the right direction. In those last few years, the Colts teams were just a step behind, didn't have the kind of talent they needed to compete for the playoffs, they would start out slow in a lot of games, and apparently his voice just was no longer resonating in the locker room the way it used to. Chuck was a solid coach with an inspiring story, but he wasn't going to take the Colts to the promised land, and when he started to fall off, he was gone. As a Colts fan, I remember Chuck Strong clearly, and it was a very bittersweet feeling seeing him leave, but I do love the direction of the team now with general manager Chris Ballard, head coach Frank Reich, and defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus though, and I hope Chuck enjoys life and retirement. I just want to take a moment and tip my hat to Chuck Pagano for what he did, how he battled through that, and how he inspired everyone, and if you ever do watch this video, I wish the best for you, Chuck. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and be sure to check out Jackson's channel if you have not already. Let me know another coach I should take a look at next. Give the video a like if you want to help the channel, subscribe if you're new here, and check out all my other videos, including my video about the rise and fall of Lovie Smith. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.